One of the last major events in the roller coaster ride that has been the 2018 season of Melee comes in the form of Summit 7, a 5-day event that will not only bring us some of the highest level of Melee competition, but tons of entertaining side events as well. So to get you excited for this weekend's festivities in the Summit House, let's take a look at the players and storylines you should be watching out for this weekend in Cali. The first thing we should talk about is Summit's format, which is much different than the traditional double elimination format that is used at most tournaments. Like at Summit 6 earlier this year, the event will be using a modified version of the Swiss tournament format with 3 rounds of matches happening in each of the pools of 8 players. The Swiss format is essentially based around having players who have the same record play against each other. This explanation of the format is going to get a little bit dry, so if it's not something you're interested in, you can skip ahead to the time listed here where we'll start talking about potential matches. So to explain this a bit better, let's look at a simulated version of Group B. The first round of matches, 1 to 4, are determined by each player's seed in the pool, with seed 1 playing against seed 8 and so on and so forth. Then for round 2, matches 5 to 8, players with 1-0 records and players with 0-1 records face off against each other. Who plays who in these pairs is determined by initial seed, so for example, Hungrybox gets to play the lowest seeded player with a 1-0 record, in this case Amza, because he's the highest seeded player with a 1-0 record. It's important to note that these matches won't change if an upset were to occur. For example, if Bananas were to beat Mewtwo in the first round, he would take Mewtwo's projected spot and play Mango in the second round. This is the case for every match except 10 and 11, which we'll talk about in a second. Then finally for round 3, matches 9 to 12, the 2 players with 2-0 and 0-2 records face off. As for the 4 players with 1-1 records, who faces off with who will be determined randomly unless a pairing would repeat a match previously played. After these 12 matches are played in both groups, all 16 players will be placed into a double elimination bracket with the top 4 in each pool starting on winner's side and the bottom 4 in each pool starting on loser's side. With this projected winners bracket, you can see that matches are paired up 1 versus 4 and 2 versus 3 from opposite pools. As for a projected losers bracket, there's no point in attempting to put one together because the lower bracket will be set up to avoid any rematches, so a singular upset in either pool would radically change it. There's also one final aspect of the format that I glossed over during talking about group stages: tiebreaker rules, which have undergone a couple of changes since Summit 6. The hierarchy of what determines who places higher in a pool is as follows. First is obviously total sets won. Second is a new stat called last opponent's total sets won. Let's jump back over to a projected pool to explain this. So basically this stat, shown as LOSW in the chart, is saying how strong your round 3 opponent is. So Plum, who is projected to lose to Leffen in round 3, has a value of 3 because Leffen won 3 sets overall. The tiebreaker after this is head-to-head record against the people you are tied with, which is also pretty straightforward. Fourth is games won minus games lost, which will almost certainly break the tie between 2 players if it even goes this far. But if they're still somehow tied in all 4 categories, their original seeds will determine who gets the higher seed in the pool. And with all that technical talk out of the way, we can get to talking about some of the projected matches to be looking out for, starting in Group A. In match 3, Zane ended up getting one of the scariest first round matches he could have fallen into in the form of Swedish Delight. The two have split their sets 2-2 this year, with Swedish taking their last set 3-0 at Aurora Blitz, and with him coming off a solid 3rd placing at the Mango Homecoming, Zane has reason to be concerned. With a win, Swedish still most likely ends up in the same situation of fighting for a winner's bracket berth in round 3 and hoping to avoid Wizzy, but having that head-to-head win over Zane would potentially set him up as the 3rd seed in the pool. Match 4 between Wizzrobe and SFAT could easily go either way, with them also sitting at a 2-2 record for the year. SFAT took the set 3-0 when they met in round 1 at Summit 6, and he's also won the last 2 times they've met this year, so SFAT is the slight favorite here, despite being the lower seed. SFAT's path after an upset resembles Swedish's, with a nearly unwinnable round 2 match, with him hoping desperately to avoid having to lose to Zayn for the 9th time this year. But if Wizzrobe is able to best SFAT, we'd get to see Wizzrobe face off with Leffen for the first time in almost a year. It's been a while and a lot has changed since they met twice at DreamHack Winter in 2017, but Wizzy did win their second set 3-0 with every game going to a last stock situation. Despite this, Leffen is still the huge favorite to win this set, but be sure to keep your eyes on this match if it happens. The other 1-0 match, Plum vs Zane, leaves the door open for a potential but not probable upset for Zane. Plum hasn't historically performed well at Summit events, and Zane stole his first set off him at Summit 6, so we'll have to see how it shakes out. His round 1 match against Swedish should not only act as a great warm-up, but it should also allow us to gauge how well he'll perform against Plum. And the final potential matchup in this pool I want to highlight is Leffen against Plum. Winning this match is huge for securing a good place in the final bracket, with it being the difference between playing Amsa and Mango if everything plays out as expected. Leffen's been on a much hotter streak during the second half of the year than Plum, with him even being in conversation for #1 for the year, but if Leffen loses this like he did at the Big House 8, his road to first at Summit and for the year is going to be much harder. I'm excited for a ton of matches in Group A, but I think it'll generally go as expected, but the same cannot be said for Group B. The big X factor behind this is match #2, Mewtwo versus Bananas. The two haven't faced off head to head this year, but Mewtwo has a very long history of not being the best at the Ices matchup and using a wide variety of characters to help deal with this issue. And Bananas has built up quite a hit list this year, taking sets off of players like Plum, Axe, and S2J, so pulling this off isn't too far out of the realm of possibility. And what makes this crazier is the fact that he would play Mango in the second round if he wins this, who also historically has had issues with Ices players, and who Banana took to Game 5 recently at GTX. This dream run could go even further, as a loss to Hungrybox in round 3 has him facing off with Zane in the projected winners bracket. So it's crazy, but keep your eyes on Bananas to potentially become one of the highest placing non-automatic invites at Summit. The other less exciting round 1 matchup to keep your eye on is another 4 vs 5 matchup that's a repeat from last Summit. Axe vs Amsa was much more up in the air at Summit 6, as Amsa was coming off a 3-0 sweep of the Pikachu at EGLX, but it appears that was just an off tournament for Axe, as he has won the last 2 times they've met, making Axe the clear favorite here. But Yoshi vs Pikachu is a matchup we almost never see, so even if it ends up being one-sided, be sure not to miss out on this unique head-to-head. In round 2, we've already briefly touched on what Mango vs Bananas could look like, but the projected match without the upset, Mango vs Mewtwo, could be quite interesting as well. These two have been facing off for over a decade, with Mango having the all-time lead, but over the last 2 years, they've been pretty close, with it sitting 3-2 in Mango's favor. Mango's Falco is looking quite amazing at GTX, and Mewtwo has been taking off time to work on his book, so I'd say Mango's the slight favorite if this match happens, but the defending Summit champ could easily take this set with just a few Marth Gimps. And that about does it for Group B matchups that we'll probably see and that I think you should be looking out for. The chaos that the group can be thrown into by a Bananas win is compelling, but without it, there's a whole lot less room for interesting matches. And before we wrap up this video, I want to go through our 16 attendees and talk about everyone's chances of winning Summit. It'd take quite a while to talk about everyone individually, so I've grouped them into 5 tiers. First off, we have the 4 players that have absolutely zero chance at taking home the gold, or realistically even top 3 at Summit. By no means am I saying that any of these guys aren't fantastically talented players. I'm just trying to say that there are too many people here that are basically brick walls to them making a deep run, so it's pretty much impossible for them. I think that Rishi and KJH will both most likely finish the event with at least 1 win to their name, but I'm not as confident for Shiz and Slox. Next up, we have a similar subset as the first group, which are players that technically have a non-zero chance of winning Summit, but even with the perfect bracket, it's still fairly impossible for pretty much the same reason as the first group. These 3 have way too many people that are good against their respective matchups that it's hard to even put together a realistic bracket that I could see them feasibly running through. Out of these 3, Swedish would be my pick to perform the best. In this third group, we have 3 players that would not only need to play at their peak, but have to have the absolute perfect bracket and matchups on their way to winning Summit. We've already talked about Banana's potential pools run, but if he were to hit something like Zane, Plum, and Mango twice, he could somehow do it and win. For Axe, it's honestly probably harder, because he's going to have to get lucky with who he faces in the 1-1 match, or end up with the perfect path through losers. And although Wizzrobe could finish second in his pool with an upset over Leffen, dodging both Mango and Mewtwo on his way to winners finals is nearly impossible. And now we move into the real contenders for taking first place with the second to last group. Zane has jumped 3 seeds higher in his pool since last Summit, and he completely deserves it with how amazing of a year he's had, including his 3rd placing at Summit 6. But with this rise in respect and recognition, it also means his opponents are going to be more prepared for him this time, and he'll have to do the same if he wants to shock the world again. The keys for Zane to becoming a Summit champion are going to be taking another set off of Plum and trying to harken back to Smash and Splash 3 by taking his first set of the year off Leffen. Mango still has not won a single tournament since Super Smash Con 2017, and without a win at Summit, he'll almost certainly go the entire year without winning anything. At the very least, he should be able to make it out of pools on winner's side by either beating Mewtwo in the 1-0 match or beating whoever he matches up with in the 1-1 match. Mango's biggest strength has always been that if he's playing well, like he was on day 1 of Summit last year, he can beat just about anyone. The keys for Mango to winning Summit will be smoothing out the issues he had against Hungrybox at GTX and being able to keep his momentum going throughout all 3 days of competing. After his amazing second placing at Super Smash Con that gave us one of the most exciting grand final sets of the year, Mewtwo has taken a break from big events for a bit. And with Ultimate coming out soon that will most likely split his attention between the two games, Summit 7 may mark the last time we'll get to see him put his entire spirit into Melee for quite a bit. The defending Summit champ is one of the few people hurt by Armada's absence because of his solid head-to-head record against him, making it more doable for runs, but it's still possible for him to become a repeat champ. The keys for Mewtwo are starting off his event right by winning his set against Bananas and hoping to avoid some of the players that could potentially be dead ends for him, like Plum or Axe. And lastly in this category, we have Plum, who as previously mentioned, has not had great performances at Summits in the past. He's an interesting case because depending on what his run would look like to first at Summit 7, there could be some argument for him being number 1 or at the very least number 2 for the year. Looking at his record this year at the top level, you could say he's much like Mango in the way that he can beat anyone if he's playing at his peak. So Plum's keys for winning Summit are just that. Try to avoid the burnout that has seemed to plague him at the Invitational before, but still try to keep the momentum burning across the entire weekend. And in the final group, we have the number 1 and 2 seeds of the event that are looking to clinch their title as 2018's best Melee player with a strong victory at the event. We'll talk about Hungrybox first because it's the same story we've been hearing all year. He's the man to beat. He's dropped a handful of notable sets to players outside the top 6 this year, like Wizzrobe and Duck, but he's also won tons and tons of tournaments. And with the only member of the top 6 that he has a negative win rate against out of the picture, Summit 7 is looking like Hungrybox's Summit to win. His key for winning Summit is going to have to be consistency. He can't be dropping sets to Amsa or starting in losers if he wants to take the gold. A Summit 7 romp without losing a single set would be the perfect end to his year to silence anyone who doubts his claim as the best player in the world for 2 years in a row. But the biggest threat to this storybook ending for the Puff main is arguably his biggest rival, Leffen. Despite jumping back and forth between Dragon Ball and Melee, Leffen has stayed impressively consistent throughout 2018, only placing lower than 3rd twice this year at Summit 6 and the Big House 8. Here at Summit, the Evo champ is going to be looking to pad out his records against the top 6 and channel all of his hatred against Jigglypuff into actually beating her within the game. The biggest key for Leffen winning Summit is going to be beating Hungrybox. If he gets the chance to and shows that his Evo win over him wasn't just a fluke, I think Leffen has an amazing shot of sweeping everyone else, not that those sets are also going to be easy. And I think that about does it for our Summit 7 preview. I'd love to hear your predictions down below on who you think is going to win at Summit, and also for who you think is going to pull off an unexpected run like Zane did earlier this year. For more information on the stream schedule or anything else at Summit 7, click the link at the top of the description. And I really don't think there's anything left to say. I've been SaveAsUntitled, and I will see you guys next time.